today's episode, we have Rhonda Garad with us. Rhonda Garad is an ex-council member of City of Greater Dandenong in southeast Melbourne. And right now she's a candidate for the federal seat of Bruce, also located in southeast Melbourne, representing the Greens Party. Rhonda, before we start the episode, I want to sort of on record thank you as a Hazara person for bringing the motion of Hazara genocide in front of the council and having that motion passed through the council, making City of Greater Dandenong one of the only local government entity that formally recognizes the events taking place and that took place in Afghanistan and Pakistan as a genocide. So, I just want to extend my gratitude for that. But with that aside, let's get into just a little bit about yourself outside your political ambitions, and who Rhonda is, or where she grew up, and what sort of led her to here today into politics. So please.
It's such an unexpected place for me to be. It was never on my radar to be political at all. So I grew up in a small country town, very religious small country town, very kind of parochial. We were Liberal country party voting people. Everybody voted the same, and no one really talked about politics because there was only one party that people were interested in, and it was just a very non kind of political upbringing, really. Although my dad was he was pretty obsessed with Labor. He used to call them the Chardonnay drinking Fabian socialists in a derogatory way. So he hated left wing.
Oh, right, okay.
Politics. So of course I hated them because that's what you do when you love your dad. You just take on his view of the world. And at about the age of 10, we moved to a bigger town, and then eventually I moved down to Melbourne to do nursing. I actually did nursing because I could get a bed, because I had they would give you somewhere to stay. And that's That's why I came down to Melbourne, because it was like an apprenticeship system back then.
Yep.
And you literally slept there, and then you worked, and then you went and slept, and you worked, and you did a 3-year apprenticeship.
So a bit like a sweatshop.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right.
And you got paid very little, and but you got very good training, and that was I didn't think about it. I didn't choose to do nursing, although I ended up kind of loving it. So it was just falling into that kind of thing. Yeah. And then I went on to do a lot of study. So I did naturopathy. I was a naturopathist for 4 years of study.
Yep.
And I worked clinically, went overseas for a while. Then I had my first child at the age of 30. Yeah. I feel like this is getting
No, please go on. Yeah.
And then I went into senior health management. So I became a chief operating officer of a large not-for-profit. And along the way I had 4 children.
Yeah.
And then about the age of 40, I had a bit of a change of focus, and I went into public health and studied my PhD, and now I'm an academic at Monash Uni, although I have chosen to leave that job, and we might get into that a bit later when we talk about Gaza.
One thing I do find is that the candidates for independence and also for the smaller parties, usually they're very well educated. They have had a pretty impressive career throughout, while a candidate from one of the major parties, there are certainly exceptions, but you would find that especially the backbenchers are just have the ticket to be a Labour or Liberal candidate, and comes as a disadvantage to that electorate because they don't necessarily have the capacity to actually advocate as well for that electorate is what I've found. So in your case, the career that you've built in public health, and you would be in very good position to be talking about public health because that's what you have experienced and built a career on. And similarly with an independent that comes into mind, Monique Ryan, and comparing that to the average Labour or Liberal candidate who might have really specialised, built really specialised careers, but they don't necessarily come in handy in governance and in representing an electorate and so on and so forth. So I find that from the time that we migrated to Australia, Australia was always seen as a thriving community and country. And now, especially after in the last few years, that has sort of changed and switched, unfortunately, to a position in a situation where we're thinking and talking about survival and not thriving anymore. You've got the cost of living crisis that are happening. So in government policies, this is alarming that in government policies are sort of focusing more on how to get by, get the people to get by rather than thrive them. So, what's if you could talk a little bit about on what's Green's position on addressing some of those issues, specifically that the cost of living crisis and just families struggling to get by.
Yeah, I so agree with you that it really has significantly changed, and I think that's been it's kind of crept under the radar until we are now. It's really everybody's really struggling, and it's just so pervasive. And I think that what I get so kind of motivated about is that this is a political choice. It's not that we are a really wealthy country, and the fact that most people are struggling. And increasingly we're sort of seeing the divide where the rich are getting richer and the poor, using that as a very broad term, but we're more of us are moving towards that poorer end. And when we look at, wages in the last decade, they've hardly moved in terms of what you can buy with your wage. In fact, what you can buy has gone down considerably. So even if you've had wage increases as such, your capacity to buy the same things that you used to be able to buy is diminished. And so we are all just a little bit poorer. And I think that's a political choice. What is really astounding about Australia is that we're very, very mineral rich. We're very rich in resources. But what we're not doing is getting enough back for those finite resources that once gone are gone. And we have about 150 billionaires who are flourishing. Yeah, so we have, the wealthy who are flourishing. Yep. Gina Rinehart has doubled her wealth in the last 6 years. We see Clive Palmer doing very well, but the rest are not. And so we have what we call a captured major parties, and they're too frightened to tax I guess we call them the oligarchs now, the fossil fuel oligarchs and the wealthy. We're too frightened, the government's too frightened because they are the ones that are keeping them in power. So there is no government, Labor and Liberal are not going to ask Gina Rinehart to pay more tax, even though she should. And so we are seeing that both parties are kind of captured by the wealthy, and the enormous influence of Murdoch and these very powerful forces are really forcing their hand, if you like, in terms of maintaining this status quo where the wealth is just rising to the top and increasingly more of us are struggling. And that's a huge difference, you know, if you look back 2 decades and further, and even raising the rate of something very basic as giving people enough money to live by when they don't have a job. No, neither party are in any way inclined to do that, despite their promises. So we're seeing this kind of unfairness and this this wholehearted allegiance to the powerful, and the rest of us are suffering. And our voice is not even there. If you listen to the major parties, you understand how our voice is not even there. You know, when they say $150 one-off energy payment or a few cents off your petrol for a year is going to fix what they call the cost of living crisis, you understand how they just don't know what struggles we're going through. And it's distressing. It's really distressing. So we want to just bring it back to what it was. You know, we used to have a fairer, more even society, and we want to bring it back to, you know, we should all be able to go to the doctor and to the dentist and to a specialist without panicking or just not going because we don't have the hundreds of dollars it's going to cost. We should all be able to, you know, as a public health specialist, it really shocks me that we would rather send particularly our older people to hospital with severe dental disease than help them go to the dentist, because that's where we're at in this country.
And prevent that from happening.
It's shocking.
It's really interesting that you brought up the country's wealth in resources and especially minerals. I'm assuming you're talking about, you know, iron ore, mining, gas and so you've got other countries that have these similar resources, and through the royalties that they charge, their citizens live quite a comfortable life. So what amazes me is that you've got the political donations that come from these mining corporations and mining companies. So our major parties aren't really doing much on that. And then on the other hand, it's a bit of a double-edged sword. You've got, you know, the Fairfax media and, you know, the Murdoch media that makes the average voter believe that it is the reason you can't find a rental is because we've got too many international students.
And too many migrants.
And too many migrants. And we will give you this, I don't know, even the $2,000 tax cut. These are just like pennies compared to what we should really be getting from that. So you guys, how do we know that you won't fall into that trap? I mean, the Greens won't fall into that same trap.
It's a great question. But just in terms of looking at other countries, look at Norway. So Norway charges 70% tax on their oil and their natural resources. So they have accumulated since the 1990s, so not that long, trillions and trillions of dollars, which is a central fund, which does fund all, you know, basic healthcare and education and so on. And that also is a buffer against any economic kind of, instability in the world. So they have grown enormously wealthy as a country, whilst individuals here have grown enormously wealthy and our country has not. So that's a political choice. It's very frustrating that I'm just going to go on a tangent because it makes me mad. But, you know, the gas, for example, that we have, we sell 80% of it overseas. Enormous profit is made on that by the corporations. They pay us very little in royalties. We give the industry $11 billion a year in subsidies, the fossil fuel industry. So not only do we not get much back, we actually subsidise them to billions of dollars. And now that, you know, if we need gas here on the eastern seaboard, we're actually going to buy in gas from another country and at high prices, where you and I will have to pay high prices if we use it, because we couldn't possibly interrupt these oligarchs making their profits by selling that overseas. It's madness.
So it's not that we're running out of gas, because a couple of months ago, and I think a few months ago, there was this huge uproar that we're going to run out of gas soon. So
and again, that's a contrived, where there's a, they contrive there's a deficiency of something, so we all panic. No, we're exporting enormous amount of gas from the Western Australian part of the country. So it's not at all, we're very rich in gas, but we are simply choosing to sell it at a higher price than you and I can make. We can't make that, we won't pay that profit. Yeah. So it's not worth their while to sell it to us. So we let them do it. We let them, and we don't have, and I have to say, the one policy, just the one, that Liberals have, which is also a Greens policy, is to have gas reserves. So we keep enough of our natural resources for ourselves first as a priority, and then so that's just a no-brainer, I think. Yeah. So it's madness, the control these powerful people have.
Because it's really frustrating that that's happening, but I work in the energy sector, in the renewable energy sector, and we have, stakeholders that used to work in gas, and through conversations that I've had with them, it's just a topic that I'm sort of passionate about, is that even through those reserves that they were saying is, so for instance, WA has a 30% reserve policy that if you find a gas well, you extract, you somehow, there are ways to estimate how much gas there is. You extract the first 70% and then leave the 30% there in case we need it later on, right? So, but the graph and the effort that it actually takes to extract the gas, the first portions of the gas is it's far less effort, and it's not going to be as costly to extract it compared to the last 30%, because you just have to go through without going to the technicalities. It just costs more, and it's a bit more effort. So, but we're not even talking about that. We're just saying that, our gas, which is supposed to be our natural resource, actually belongs to these these corporations that sell it to other countries, and we have to buy from other countries. And then in the meantime, we're being told that we're going to be running out of gas. Yeah. Okay.
And really, I think there's enough gas, and this is a way of scaring us into allowing, when Labor say we've got to open our 31st gas and coal project, we're going to say, "Oh, thank goodness, do that." It's a way of really fooling us into a deficiency where there's none, a scarcity where there's none, to really get us on side. When in fact we know that with the climate crisis, the last thing we should be doing is opening new coal and gas. Yep. So this is part of the kind of deception that the Murdoch press play into, and we don't get real information. And this is kind of the distressing part, I guess, of the way our politics is done.
Yeah. So again, I want to come back to that question that, for instance, the Greens, you guys win, good majority of your seats in this next federal election. How do we sort of know that you won't fall into that same trap in the next election, because your party has become a considerable size for these corporations to now actually heed and pay attention to, and maybe invest a bit. If you can. So
we have a policy of not taking donations. We have a policy of not, as soon as you start taking donations from these corporations, you are owned. So we just have a very strict policy of not taking donations. And, we tried to, in the last parliament, get up, and independents did to limit donations, and of course both parties didn't come on board with that because they're doing very well financially from the existing system. But we will never take donations, so we don't owe anyone anything. Also, your point before about career politicians is a really important one, because what we have seen over the last, 40 years is this apprenticeship in being in a party. So what happens is you're a young kid, you might study law, you get taken into a political party, you become a chief of staff or a staffer for a politician, and that is an apprenticeship in how to protect the party. So what you're learning is not how to represent, but you're actually learning the skill of how to stay in power and how to protect the party. And so when these people move along the conveyor belt and are MPs down the track, their priorities are just that. How do we stay in power and how do we protect the party? And that means take money from whomever. It doesn't matter, because your central aim is your own existence. And so we don't do that. We are from the community. We are people that have had careers and lived in the world. And so it's a very different mindset. We're not career politicians. We're not here just to be in politics. We can have other careers. We can do other things, and we've chosen to do this because we believe in it and because we want to represent the community. So it's a very different ethos, and we deliberately create an ethical kind of framework to work in to protect ourselves from that, because it is very easy, even kind of subtly, to become owned. So we have to have this really strong ethical framework around us. And that's the difference. And it's such a fundamental difference. Like, it's an absolute difference. So we will never be owned in the way they are.
Yeah, it's even at a high level, when a political party wins majority government, even at government, what I have noticed is that the priority is their party first, and then the rest of society, and so it's a bit it's not as effective form of governance, definitely. So we touched a little bit about public health, and I want to go into specifics of the Greens policies on public health, and what sort of cards you have that you want to introduce and advocate for.
So we want to properly fund the health system. So the health system is always on its legs financially. Most of public hospitals have about 2 payrolls, in funds. They're constantly on this drip feed of money, and we are seeing the privatisation of the health system by stealth. So when you and I are paying, and the other day I made an appointment just with the GP, I had to put $80 down on a credit card just to keep that appointment. So by stealth, we say we've got a universal health system which is free, but the reality is increasingly it's not. You might have a bulk billing GP, but they'll always be booked out. So you end up going to the GP that you have to pay $30, $40, $50 to see, and that can be enough when you are financially stressed, to make you really think twice about going. And if you've got 3 or 4 kids, it becomes a real stress. So we believe that in a wealthy country like us, we should have the right to a free health system. And we've just seen that both parties have just selected our policy and adopted it, which we're fine about. But for 3 years while we've been pushing it, they weren't interested. And now just before the election, they say they're going to fully fund GPs. But we don't say that's enough because dental disease in Australia, you can actually tell people's level of income by their teeth in Australia, that people who are well off will have really lovely teeth and people who are doing a harder won't. And that's a real class divide. And that should not be. Your teeth are part of your health. You have dental disease, you get cardiovascular disease, you'll get other diseases. So you can't separate. You can't just take one part of the body out and say, oh, we won't fund that, but we've got a health system, that's a universal healthcare system. So we want that in Medicare. So you take your Medicare card along and you can get your basic dental needs met. We also, mental health. Mental health is a huge issue. Good luck if you can find a mental health professional if you need it, and the hundreds of dollars it will cost you to see a mental health professional. And often when people, are needing a mental health professional, they just may not be in a position to have that money. So we just think it's unacceptable that people are unable to get mental health care when they need it, and we also want that brought into Medicare. These are our basic rights. And a wealthy country like ours, these should be our basic rights. Yeah. We have people paying thousands of dollars in private healthcare if they can afford it, particularly older people, and we would like to see that scaled back and actually fully fund a good quality public healthcare system that's fair to everybody.
Yeah, that's astonishing to a lot of people that are not from Australia. And when we tell them that dental is not covered under Medicare, they're amazed by it unless they're from America. But so the proposition is that dental will also be part of Medicare. Okay, that's
and mental. So dental
and mental health. Yeah, just a little bit on mental health, because through my work I have access to a therapy thing through work.
ESP, is it?
Yeah, something along that lines.
Yeah.
So regularly, whenever I needed to, I was just referring to them, and then on this one instance, I thought I might actually go through my GP and speak to someone. The wait list to speak to that person was 3.5 months. It was just amazing how congested that system was, and I didn't go ahead with it because who waits 3.5 months, but anyways, and I don't know what it would have costed me anyway. So
it would have cost you hundreds of dollars, hundreds and hundreds.
There you go. So that's pretty astonishing for a wealthy country like Australia.
But what we're seeing is that people who are doing well, they'll have. That's not a problem for them. And, so dentals, none of these things are a problem for them. And they may have the highest level of private healthcare. So you're seeing that at this level, at the sort of upper, wage scale or income scale, none of that's a problem. It's only a problem as you move down, the economic kind of slide. Yeah. And so, again, this inequality we're seeing creeping in every aspect of Australia that wasn't there before. Yep. And so it is this unfairness that we need to redress. We need to bring back a fair and equal system.
Yeah, definitely. I'm totally with you there. So while we are on the topic of federal matters, I also want to talk about the foreign policies that you guys would want to are proposing to adopt, more specifically around the turmoils that are happening around the world at the moment, specifically Palestine. And you mentioned that you're no longer in Monash because of if you can
but if we're talking about turmoil, we have to talk about Trump right now. Because I think the US has lost $11 trillion since his inauguration now, which is enormous, and we're seeing we're just seeing stock markets around the world crash. Good time to get out of AUKUS. So AUKUS is that thing that we signed up to, which costs will cost us $375 billion. It's so much money, and that's money that is not going to our health system, that's not going to our education system. And that is going to an unstable ally right now. So America is not an ally we can really trust right now. We don't know where America is going. We should not be hitching our wagon to a country that the rest of the world is moving away from. We can see that Trump is unpredictable. We don't know what conflicts are going to come from this. What we're seeing is a financial war committed by America right now in the world. What Trump is really doing with all these random tariffs is actually taking, is taking a war-like footing financially to the whole world. And that may end up in real conflict because countries are really going to struggle and suffer. And, this is a really dangerous time and we should not be an ally with such a dangerous partner. So the first thing we want to do is pull out of AUKUS, and we want to take autonomy back in our foreign policy. So, and that directly applies to Gaza because having been hitched our wagon to an unstable ally who has full-throatedly supported this genocide so passionately, put every bomb in the hand of Netanyahu, and given billions and billions in weapons and military equipment to slaughter children and slaughter innocent people, that had we not been hooked up through AUKUS, possibly, I'd like to think, Labor could have actually condemned Israel. But we saw that when we signed AUKUS, we actually signed away our autonomy in terms of, our foreign...
So it's not just a submarine deal. It's
it's an alliance. And it's an alliance.
It's an alliance, right, okay.
So, and those submarines, Trump has said we're not going to get them. Trump has said they will need so the deal was if America needs them, they'll keep their own. So we'll only get a submarine if they think they can spare some. And but we will get their nuclear waste. And they will have the right to park their nuclear submarines. So we will get all the downside, but we will not actually get what we asked for.
Just on the nuclear submarines, because it is such an significant piece of kit when it comes to your defense strategy. I don't think there's any country that has actually bought that from another country. I think they've all just built it.
Yeah. And when you say brought...
I could be wrong.
Yeah, look, I can't comment on every country, but when you say brought, it's a bit of a fraught term because we won't be able to autonomously operate them because we're dependent on America technology and also their military personnel to actually run them. So this term we're actually buying them, it's a bit of a furphy because we are wholly dependent on the American military system to be able to operate those. So really all we are is an extension of the American military system, and we know that's a precarious place to be.
So sorry, I didn't actually know that was the case. So what you're saying is that it's not like we're buying these submarines and then they're giving it to us and saying, there you go, Australia, walk away with it, right? And use it as you will. But we will have that, and throughout its operational life, it will still be tied to the US.
It'll be dependent on the American,
So
because it's what we call a joint military endeavour. So we need their personnel that have specialty skills. But we also need their military technology that will be used in that. So we'll always be dependent. So it's not take it away and we can do what we like. It really is our submission to America in a defence sense, and that is playing into this genocide in Gaza, and it's playing into our entering conflicts that, the biggest concern, of course, is if America goes to war with China or starts to really arc up their threats around China, who is our biggest trading partner. And the good thing is with these tariffs, America's not a huge trading partner for us, but China is. So they go to war with China. That's our economy really squashed. But also we don't actually have a problem with China right now. Like, why are we going to war with someone in our own region that hasn't, provoked us despite, lots of the Murdoch media portraying them as being very provoking. So, it's very concerning that we do not have the autonomy over our defence system, our military system, our foreign policy, that we've actually sort of become, just an outpost of the US. And
we've become like one of those major parties' backbenchers in the parliament where we don't
stay
actually
silent,
have a say.
Do what you're told.
Utopia has a scene about our relationship with China and the defense that we're trying to build against them.
I've seen that. It's hilarious. Yeah,
it's pretty funny.
So who's our enemy? China. It's China. Yeah, China's our enemy. It's a hilarious episode, and it is that comical. I mean, it's so crazy. It's comical, but it's also scary, and it's really scary. Trump is really a scary person right now, and no one seems to understand what his rationale. He doesn't seem to have any other rationale other than chaos, and a really good time for us to pull out of that deal, save 300, and we've spent about 10 billion, save the rest and invest that in our health system. And can we talk about education? Education now, we are seeing, particularly out here in Bruce, that a lot of people are having to send their kids to private schools even if they don't want to, because there's not a lot of options, or they perceive the public schools as not good enough, and paying a lot of school fees, thousands and thousands, which on top of mortgage stress, on top of everything else, is huge. When in fact, a well-funded quality public school is a very good option for kids. But what we're seeing is they're starved of funds, and we don't have Australia-wide the fully funded system. We're seeing that Labor are fully funding some parts of it, but not all of it. But what people in Bruce should have, they should all have a really good public school option, primary and secondary school, that they can believe in, that they can see is doing really well, and then they shouldn't have thousands of dollars out of pocket. My daughter, last year I spent about $2,500. She goes to a public school, but with computers, with uniforms, with school fees, with camps, that's a public school, and you're out of pocket a few thousand. You've got a few kids. That's a lot, particularly when you go back to school and you're paying all those initial costs. That's a lot.
I went to a public school, and I know of people that have gone to private schools, and I can see the huge contrast that you absolutely cannot deny in terms of opportunities that are available in a private school. So, given the situation and the stark difference between these two, I actively encourage my community and my family members, my friends, to set up a school fund and send their kids to a private school, because honestly, the public schools that are available to us in Bruce, in the surrounding areas, your kid would have to be an exceptionally good student, an intelligent student, that rises above the mainstream culture of that school to become an average engineer.
Yeah, but let's break that down. And I absolutely understand your decision, and almost every second parent I talk to has the same thoughts. But what makes that private school better? And often it's about more teachers. It's about better facilities. And we know that the federal government give, for every $1 it gives a public school, it gives $3 to private schools for infrastructure, for beautiful buildings and swimming pools and so on. Why? Why are we not evenly funding both private and public? Why do our public school kids have classrooms with, really, really inadequate facilities? But why don't they have, the numbers of teachers that public schools have? And if we fully funded the system, we would have equally, a better those same opportunities that you're talking about
Yep.
in private. You shouldn't have to go to a private school. And often private schools are religious schools of some sort, and parents
Yep.
are not necessarily that religion.
Yep.
So they are having to send their children to schools where they don't necessarily share the ethos or the, you know, the worldview of that school, but they do believe that it's better. And, you know, so, but, you know, the stress, that financial stress, it has impact on family. Like, people work 2 jobs.
Yes.
Both parents, so they don't actually see their kids, and that actually has a detrimental effect on kids. You know, so there are these other impacts that are not great, and we should again have really well funded public school options. If you go to Europe, if you go to the Scandinavian countries, you're in a public system the whole way through, really well funded, very high standard, because they fund them well. That's a priority, and they don't fund over, you know, they don't send more dollars to private schools.
Okay. So, as I understand it, the reason the private schools have better facilities, better teachers, and you know, just more money to burn for the students is not so much from the fees that they get from the students. Yet that probably has a thing to it as well, as a part to play. But the government actually gives them more funding compared to a public school.
Yeah. So it's a 2-tiered funding system. So the federal government funds capital components of that fund, and the state government fund, you know, the salaries and the operational costs. So, but what we're seeing at federal level is that, it's about a 1-to-3 ratio. So $1 to a public school, 3 to private. And this has emerged over time. Labor, historically, Labor was very closely associated with the Catholic Church. And so when Labor came into power, they were always very generous to the Catholic Church. But over time, you know, as other religious groups, or not even a religious group, but other private schools have emerged, this is a great vote buying way. If you buy, you know, a school, how many votes are there? If you've got 300, 500, 800 kids in a school, you've got a lot of votes there. So you just say to them, hey, we're gonna build that thing, the barista thing or the swimming pool thing. That is a very neat and tidy way to buy votes. And so this has just been happening, and now it's kind of at an explosive level where it's hard to put that genie back in the box, really. But we do want to fully fund public schools so that they are equal to. But, you know, interestingly, as an academic, the outcomes are the same. So if you look at the score, the overall attainment scores in secondary,
like HR scores,
they are equal. So when you say there's all these opportunities, that's not actually in terms of academic achievement, but it may be in social, access to social privileged family, you know, a different kind of social group. But it's not to say that poorer schools can't achieve that also. And what I think is most tragic, and John Howard started this really, is that there's all this sort of shade thrown on public schools that they don't have values. You know, they're just kind of aimless, and, you know, everybody's just turning up to get their paycheck, and no one really wants to be there. And they don't have any kind of philosophy or ethical kind of bent, which is so far from the truth. It's so far from the truth. You know, my daughter goes to a public school. It's incredibly, community commitments, and, you know, paying back, and, you know, you're kind of that kind of obligation you have to the people around you. These are strongly operationalised in that school in every way. And so it really is this kind of undermining of the public health system that feeds into this idea that I've got to send my kid to the $30,000 school, or I'm not a good parent.
No, look, I agree with you. You're academically, they might be on par. I think you will find that if you were to draw a bell curve, that you might see a trend that private schools might actually be a better performer, even academically. I'm just maybe assuming.
I will refute that because that is where I work. But
right, okay.
But I understand why you think that.
Yeah.
But also, you know. I was going to say that, but continue your point, and I'll see if I can go back to that.
Yeah. So it's and it is. It all comes down to funding, right? It's if you've got better facilities in your school and your school is a nice environment. When you walk out of your classroom, you open the door from your classroom. The walk it takes to go to your locker, that environment. How well it's constructed, how well that environment has been considered to be a healthy environment. So in engineering we called it SBS, sick building syndrome. So how long it takes to feel claustrophobic. So these private schools, they are really well lit, have good fresh air, and it just feels nice to be walking down the corridor compared to some of these public schools that are just being constructed up in Clyde. They look like prison cells from the outside. Like honestly, they look like prison cells rather than schools. You've got 3-story container blocks that are stacked on top of one another. Alkira is another example. But anyways.
Yeah, I mean, there's no reason for that.
Yeah.
There's no reason for that.
Yeah.
Good design. Yeah. Everybody deserves good design, particularly our kids. I can't think of who deserves better design. And better design doesn't have to cost, as you would know.
Yeah.
But also, just in terms of, just going back to your point about, the bell curve is actually a socioeconomic bell curve. Yeah. So where there is lower income, where you have poorer communities, that's where you see poorer outcomes. So it's not a private-public divergence in outcomes. It's a socioeconomic. So, but we we kind of confuse the two, and we think if we send our kids to public school, they're going to be on drugs, and girls will be pregnant, and there's all these kind of negative outcomes. But actually, we see some pretty toxic culture in private schools. We see that in some private schools there is this kind of elitist kind of culture, and we saw last week that one of our most elite schools very close to here, there was a really worrying incident around the students' behaviour, and we that's quite not uncommon for us to see that in these very elite schools. So when you're talking about culture, private schools can sometimes not have great culture too.
Yeah, no, I agree with you there. Yep.
And so, but the point is, you should have a choice. I don't know what you would do, but if I said to you, there's a really great public school, really nice buildings, very adequate buildings, the same teacher number of hours that your child would be given as the private school, you may be very inclined to take that up. And that's $30,000 you're not having to find per child. And that means you probably don't have to work 7 days a week. You spend more time with your child. You actually contribute to their, your relationship with them. That's going to have really great outcomes. So I think, it's people are being forced down a path that they don't have options, and that's not right. Yeah. I mean, if people still want to do it, that's great, but they should have options. Yeah.
And then as that sort of continues on, over generations, that gap is just going to increase. It'll just keep on increasing. So a comic way of putting it is that the Liberals and Labours are appealing to voters in private schools by offering donations and funding, but the Greens on the other hand are saying, look, let's go back to the drawing board on this instance and have equal amount of funding both for public and private schools, such that there is no real advantage in terms of number of teacher hours, and these are very
and teacher pay, teacher conditions.
Yeah, these are very real things that impacts your experience as a student going through the education system. Okay, I want to come back to the electorate of Bruce and the sort of incidents that have been happening in the wake of the election. One thing that was that took my interest was the incident where the Liberal members got heckled at a mosque during Eid prayers. So I found that so they'd gone there and they had pledged whatever that means,
yes. Whatever that means.
Yeah, $6.5 million for that mosque. Now, I personally have. I'm not sure how Greens would go about it. Is that I have. I think there's ethical issues with that because you're getting that $6.5 million through the presence of all the members that have come there for the Eid prayers, and it's a religious congregation, right? It's supposed to be religious only. It's a spiritual thing, and then for instance, I've gone to that mosque for that religious procession, and all of a sudden I'm having to listen to a speech from a politician that, from a Muslim point of view, if you just talk about the interests of Muslims, have predominantly been supportive of the war in Gaza and have been a strong advocate and supportive of Israel in there. So this party, as a party and as an ideology, do not follow the interests of Muslims in a global and also in a national type environment. So yeah, that was really interesting from my point of view. How did you sort of find that incident? And
I was so proud of those people that stood up.
Yeah,
I actually felt like my whole body just, I was just so proud when I saw that video and people were standing up. There's a whole lot of things that's wrong with that. But for a start, people should be allowed to pray Salat at the time when they're supposed to pray. That making them wait 45 minutes and not praying is unconscionable, really. But then they have to, Jason Wood was a bit of cosplay, so he was dressed as, I think, a Pashtun lord of some sort. Yeah. And then, assumes that the whole crowd is going to be just falling over them with gratitude for this, what is fictional, $6.5 million. Fictional, they're not in government, right? So, and when I saw the video of those people standing up, the first people that stood up and said, "We don't want your blood money," I just can't tell you how happy I was that they did that. And I just thought, you are showing this moral, this kind of difference in moral or ethical stance that a politician will think that you can come onto their religious premises and offer blood money, which is the blood of Palestinian children. And they will go, yep, we'll just forget about the last 18 months and what we're seeing every day, and we'll just think about ourselves and we'll just be as avaricious as you are and have no moral compass. And the instant they spoke, like it wasn't, they didn't even hear them out. Like the instant they started speaking, people rose up, and it was just I just felt so happy watching that. And I was so proud of all those people that did that, because it's very easy at times to say, well, what can we do about Gaza, and we need a new mosque, and just forget about it. But what I'm finding in this election is that the Muslims are rising up in the most collective and the most organised way that I've ever seen them gather politically to use that one political voice as one political voice and say we are not going to support anyone who supports this genocide because they are us. and we are them. And even as a non-Muslim, they are us. My children don't like me to talk about them, but they are of Somali Ethiopian heritage. Beautiful. I've got to say, beautiful children. But when I look at those Palestinian children, I just see my children. I don't know how anyone doesn't see them. And when I see those mothers mourning the loss of their children, I don't know how any mother is not on their knees. I don't know how any father that's looking. I don't know. I don't understand how people can have this kind of mental divide that somehow Palestinians are not people and somehow Israel is absolutely entitled to break every UN law, going back, to the Nakba, and that's okay. And we should just carry on as normal. And Muslim Votes Matters are supporting me. I'm so proud to stand with them because they're showing that kind of moral courage that I wish the whole Australia would show. And I feel like they're leading the whole country in showing what you can do if you gather and if you are morally driven to do the right thing. Your power is enormous. And in the Cedar Bruce, it's 14-15%.
14-15% are Muslim voters.
Muslim vote. Yeah. And if that's realised even partially, that's sending a really strong message to the major parties that you are it is noticed what you're doing. It is noticed what you are doing. You've never condemned Netanyahu. You still call them your friends. You have never sanctioned them. We saw just a few days ago, 15 paramedics executed one by one and put in a shallow grave, one by one, and told that they didn't know they were ambulance drivers. And we know that the footage has emerged recently where they did. And we heard that young boy apologising to his mum for being murdered and saying to her, I was just trying to do some good. And then he's executed. And then we saw the greatest massacre of children 3 weeks ago in modern history. And there have been more children slaughtered, massacred, bombed, orphaned and maimed than any war in modern history. Any more, beyond in scale, beyond anything we've known. And still our government says nothing. And the Liberal Party are fully on board and fully supportive. So, if they won't stand up for the rights of, and this is not a war. We all know it's not a war. We know it's shooting fish in a fishbowl.
Yes.
If they won't stand up for them, what else won't they stand up for?
Yeah, and you've got the topic of Palestine and the war on Gaza, or not war, but the massacre on Gaza, and then you've got even if we think about the politics from a national point of view, the Liberal Party is anything but supportive of Muslims. So I'm actually really proud of those guys that stood up against them in the mosque as well. There was this one guy where I think as soon as they started speaking, he'd stood up and said, he was saying that "O Mardum," which means "Oh people," these people have killed, other people have killed Muslims. They have their blood on their hand. How are you allowing them to preach here? So there's that. I wish our community, the Hazara community, had equal awareness of equal political awareness, just in general.
Yeah.
And then also, Peter Dutton, just last year in 2024, towards the tail end of last year, he said something that, in Western Sydney, you're going to have independents, you're going to have Muslims that might become MPs, and this is going to be a complete disaster. And there's actually a court case, an ongoing court case about it. I don't know what happened with the court case, but so you've got a political party that shamelessly advocates against Muslims, and then they still have the face to actually go to a mosque during Eid prayers and and pledge,
Dressed as.
Yeah, that. Well, but yeah, good on the guys that actually, kicked him out, stood up against him. Yeah, and then so the instance that I want to talk about is that where we had that same candidate come into a mosque during Muharram in a Hazara gathering, Shia gathering, not just Hazaras, and he was there together with his a couple of other entourage, and nobody actually noticed them. Yes, they didn't speak, so there's that difference. They didn't actually make a speech, but they were just there. So nobody stood up against them and questioned them that, why are you here? I guess a mosque is, open to anyone, so there's that element to it as well. You can't just bar people from coming in, but this is... So whole single-handedly has created a huge division in the Afghanistan diaspora here between the Hazaras and the Pashtuns here, which I'm deeply concerned about.
Too,
it has to a point that it has actually affected my very personal friendships and relationships with the my Pashtun friends that I went to high school with. So it's and I think again I'm very proud of the guys that stood up against them. So if anything, I wish we had that level of awareness as well. One thing I want to ask is that in terms of your preferences for the election, have you sort of thought about that? And
but just before that, can I just talk about when you talk about this really worrying division between the Hazara and the Pashtun? What's really worried me is the way this has become an issue of this election. And you're probably aware of the renaming petition in Thomas Street. People have cited this as being a point of conflict and the point of division. And what's really distressed me about that is that the Thomas Street traders politely put up a petition using democratic systems and politely asked the council, the Dandenong Council, to remove this name because it was hurtful to them. This is not a name of a street. It's not an official name. It's not listed anywhere. It's a marketing name. And the traders went about this in a democratic way. And this has become, the touchstone of this kind of division, and the Hazara have been cast as the villain and as the conflict generators, and of bringing overseas conflicts over here. The same kind of rhetoric we saw against all of us standing against Palestine. We're bringing overseas conflicts here. We're causing social disruption. We're causing conflict. That same rhetoric has been brought down on the Hazara, and many of those people have been brought under enormous pressure. And I have been labelled this divisive politician manipulating the Hazara community for my own political ends, which is absurd. And as you mentioned before, I've had a long-standing relationship with the Hazara, and I strongly believe in a multicultural community. Groups have a right to be heard. The Pashtun put up an opposing petition, and I support that too, because both have gone about it in a democratic way, and the decision making will go to an independent body. But the point being that the Hazara have just had, that really the Labor Party have come down on them for having the temerity to ask politely for a reconsideration of a name. And we have seen the power of the Labor Party, through the council, through Julian Hill, absolutely vilify them and by extension me, and cast us all as, and then go to the Pashtun community and say, all of these people are against you. Rhonda Garad hates Pashtun people, which is so wrong, because I passed a motion in council to get, after the fall of Kabul, to get 20,000 Afghans here, many of which who were working with the military Australian Defence Forces, and so many of them were Pashtun as well as Hazara. Yeah. And I have always worked, in harmony with them. But for this political gain that Labor perceive they have deliberately divided the community. And so when I meet Pashtun people now, they're saying, oh, you're the one that hates us, without ever having met me, with no evidence that I've ever said anything negative about them. And this is what you're experiencing. And this is being deliberately conflated. And I think it's example of how these major parties will do anything for power, and they do not understand the consequences that we have to live with. We have to live in this community, and community members have to live thinking that I as a councillor or I as a representative hate them, which is absolutely absurd. And when you think about it, why would I alienate anyone? If it was about political expediency, why would I do that? And so I just feel that this ethical, this lack of moral fortitude, if you like, is what we're seeing in Gaza. It's their subservience to the US. It's their subservience to the oligarchs. It's their willingness to use this power down even at our level. This is who they are, and this is what they have become. And this is why when Dutton says, we're going to have Muslims and independence, threaten us with a good time, because that would be perfect. We need more independence, real people, minor parties. We need real, morally driven people in there. That's going to be great. And a minority government.
And, early on you took examples of the Scandinavian countries and European countries of having a pretty good high standards. I've looked into those countries. They all almost always end up in a hung parliament. Yeah.
Well, Australian Federation, for the first 13 years, we were a hung parliament because there were no Labor and Liberal parties. Right. So we started for the first decade, and we've only had, 125 years of parliamentary system. And then we had Julia Gillard, of course. So, and which was passed more legislation than any government in Australian history.
One thing I sort of read about that term when Julia Gillard. I don't like the name hung parliament, but look, let's go with it. But it's they passed more legislations there, and the parliament shouldn't necessarily have a KPI of a number of legislations to pass through. It's like. You're the parliament. You're there to improve the standard and quality of living and pass laws that will benefit the constitutions, the voters, in improving that quality and standard of life. So I think it's just a really wrong metric to be using. And
but I guess what we're saying is that what she had to do was not what Labor do now. They just, we're going to do this, and then we'll just do that. She had to negotiate that. She had to go to the independents and say, all right, what do you want? And she had to actually, and she was, to her credit, she was a very good negotiator, and she listened, and then she got outcomes that were satisfactory to those independents who were really good. Tony Windsor and the other independents, they were great independent. They were great community leaders. And so we got really very good outcomes from that negotiation process. But when you have a majority, either Labor or Liberal, they don't necessarily need to negotiate with anyone.
Yeah, I personally think that, in a balance of power, democracy happens there. So,
let me ask, can I ask you a question?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
When you look at Parliament or even Council, any level of state, any level of government, do you see anyone that looks like you, that sounds like you? Is there any reflection of you there?
No, and the reason I say no is not so much because I'm after someone that should necessarily look like me or be of the same background or anything like me. What I do want to have in common with them is the same ideologies and principles. So I was in a through the some of the hearings that I've been having of through research before having you on the podcast is through some of the researches that I've been having of you back when you were in council. That bit where you're talking about the swimming pool in Dandenong and upgrading that swimming pool in Dandenong. So there was just a little bit for the listeners' benefit. There's a company, ATCO, that was supposedly going to be awarded to upgrade that swimming pool, but that same company is in a lawsuit with another council in Melbourne, Q, because the building collapsed under construction. And now it's turned ugly between them and the council. So you and a couple of other councillors were sort of communicating your distress and your concerns about that. I mean, it's really it's a bit of a no-brainer, because maybe for me, because I come from that industry, from that engineering and construction industry, and so, and then you have the other councillors that were sort of talking.
The Labor council.
I'm not sure. Yeah,
it was
to be fair,
complete Labor, not
yeah.
Labor.
To be honest, I'm not sure if they were Labor or not. But yeah, okay. They were talking about a completely separate thing, that the need for a swimming pool, rather than let's talk about this contractor getting awarded the contract to build this swimming pool. Yeah, there was that other councillor, I don't know what his name was. He actually said that we're not talking about whether we need a swimming pool or not. Yes, we know we need it, but how do we get it? Yeah, so I do agree with you that but from my personal position, I want to see same ideologies that represents my ideology and philosophy about community and life and just the Australian way of life in representing me in Parliament and in areas of government.
Me too.
Yeah,
that's why I reluctantly became a councillor because it wasn't on my radar, and I was asked to stand, and I didn't ever conceive myself as a political person. But like you, I looked around and who is the voice that mirrors my voice? Who is saying the things that I'm concerned about, or who has the values that I have, or who's creating the world for my children that I want my children to live in? And they were thin on the ground, and that's why the Greens resonated with me, because essentially they were about fairness.
Yeah.
And to me, that's my driving goal. And that issue you're talking about around that contract, it was deeply concerning, and I'm still surprised that they passed that. But what concerned me more was that they wouldn't, as you said, they weren't dealing with the issue. They weren't actually responding to the charges. They weren't actually responding to this, the flow and implications of that for us. They were just saying, we need a swim pool, we'll take whoever, we've got this person, we'll take whoever, and not engaging with the issue in a way that I think the community would expect them to, because we're talking about $120 million at this stage, and probably more, that my grandchildren, your grandchildren will be paying off. I think we all would expect a higher standard of, critical thinking and around that. I'm constantly distressed at the lack of really deep kind of interest or concern that not just the councillors but our politicians show. And when you ask them about issues, they don't seem to understand them in great depth, or they don't consider, from a values point of view, what that really means. And I think that we're poorly, I would say we're poorly done by generally, as a general statement, particularly, when we have this Labor-Liberal divide. So I think it's only, now we are all seeing in independence, good independence, in minor parties, we're starting to see a difference, and we're starting to see people that I think reflect us, what we, as you said, what you want to see in politicians. And so I think we're starting to feel hope. And actually that's what I've enjoyed most about this election, is that people feel hopeful because it's likely we're going to have a minority government, which is a good thing. And it's likely we're going to have this powerful third entity, which is the crossbench, which would be Greens and other independents. And so we will have a multiplicity of voices. And so Labor and Liberal don't have this automatic, we'll do what we want. And we will have more real people in there, real voices in there, and they will have to negotiate. And that's the best outcome we could have. But as you say, most people kind of think there's just either Labor, they can only vote for Labor or Liberal, and that's kind of perpetuated by Murdoch as well. And so part of the challenge is around helping people understand there is this other option, and it's better for us all if we get more people like that in there.
Yeah, so it's looking likely that there will be a balance of power.
Yeah.
So
all the polling showing a minority government.
Yeah.
Early polls showed LNP, but the wheels seem to be falling off that because, Dutton so closely aligned himself with Trump, and Trump is just, it's mind-blowing what Trump's doing. So I think people are very nervous. He said he's going to sack 41,000 public servants. If we walked out here, how many public servants have we got? We have a lot of public servants.
Yes.
And Australians, we're not America.
Yeah.
And we don't want to see mass
We
culling.
don't want to be America, yeah. It's
we certainly don't right now. So he said he's going to cut 41,000. Then he said he was going to bring in DEI, right? Like diversity, equity and inclusion. Well, that's every woman, every person of colour, that's every disabled person. Right, we're just all taken out of the... Australians smarter than that.
Yeah.
They're smarter than that. So I think that it's looking more like... a Labor minority government, which would be the best outcome. In terms of the Greens, we would prefer a Labor minority because we do feel that values around health and education are more strongly held.
Yep.
And so we would prefer to be negotiating with a Labor minority government.
So that brings us back to the question of your preferences and how you want to you propose your voters to be voting. So how have you thought about your preferences yet? Or?
So we're starting to. So we won't know who's actually standing until Friday. So Friday is a cut-off day. Right. So we still don't know how many candidates we've got. We do know there's 5 right-wing, rightish wing. Yep. So we know that we don't have a great deal in common with them. We are very, very determined that Dutton won't get in. So that will certainly be... everything we're doing will be to keep Dutton out. Pauline Hanson, we don't want to help her in any way. So that would be certainly...
your last preferences.
Towards the bottom. That's likely. But as I say, we need to have discussions. And then it's about what goes next. And that we will decide. And we do have to wait and see who else stands. Unfortunately, I'm the only candidate right now that stands against a genocide, which is shocking. And so it's hard for me to have a lot in common because that's kind of, and people say it's an overseas issue. It's more than an overseas issue. It is about human rights and it is about fairness. So to me, it's a seminal point of connection. If there may be, a socialist party that stand that maybe they will, we may have more philosophically in common. So we do have to wait, but they're kind of the thinking.
As a in general, it's one nation, and the Liberals will be towards the bottom, and then.
And we'll see what's in the middle. But Labor will certainly be above the LNP. So we certainly, we would certainly prefer a Labor minority government for sure.
Okay. Well, I've had a great time having this conversation with you, Dr. Ronda. So, yeah, thank you so much for your time, taking time off your really busy schedule. I know you're avidly, campaigning for the election. I wish you all the best for it. I certainly enjoyed this conversation, and I'm sure a lot of the viewers sort of find themselves in what we sort of talked about and the priorities that you have. I think there's an alignment there. So yeah, again, I wish you all the best, and we'll definitely have this conversation again.
Yeah, I just want to thank you for the chance to have a long conversation. So often in a campaign you just dot pointing things. It was just so enjoyable to have a really long conversation and to really talk about things that are really important. So I really thank you for that opportunity.